HR leaders, what's on your mind these days? Is it AI? Is it the economy? The talent market? Remote work? Retention? DEI? Pay transparency? New laws? Our 2024 Workplace Trends Report outlines how HR leaders are thinking about these challenges and what they believe will help their organizations overcome them. Want to find out what they said? Head on over to peoplemanagingpeople.com/Workplace Trends 2024 and download the report to find out. There's a technology solution for seemingly everything these days. Need help setting your objectives and key results? There's more than a few software solutions for that. Need a new talent management platform? There's a never-ending stream of technology service providers bidding on Google's ad space and hoping you'll search and find them. So how do you go about building a tech stack for your people operations functions that serves your organization's specific needs? How do you plan for the adoption of AI into your technology capabilities? How do you implement a new software in a way that makes sense for your organization? Welcome to the People Managing People podcast. We're on a mission to build a better world of work and to help you create happy, healthy, and productive workplaces. I'm your host, David Rice. My guest today is Andrew Swiler. He's an entrepreneur and CEO of Lanteria, a developer of HR, talent, performance, and learning management software solutions. We're going to be talking about all things software, AI, and technology implementation. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you, David. Excited to be here. Excited to kind of go through the ideas that we tossed around.
First, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into the software business and end up becoming the CEO of a product like Lanteria?
My journey here is pretty roundabout. I started my career in private equity, doing a lot of distressed things. We bought a lot of retail companies, things like that. Private equity, as you might have heard, is a pretty intense business to be in. I got super burnt out and ended up leaving in about 2010 and just went and traveled. Traveled for 6 months. I met my wife on an island in Croatia. She was from Barcelona. I convinced her to move to San Francisco. In San Francisco, I was working with software companies, sort of as like a CFO type of role, more in like finance. And my wife one day said she wanted to move back to Barcelona. She told me, you can come with, or you can stay here. And so I packed up my things, moved to Barcelona, didn't speak the language, started an e-commerce company because I couldn't get a real job. That didn't work. And then I started an eyewear company with my wife. She actually started the company. And we sold that back in 2019, right before the pandemic. And I didn't know what to do. Was out there looking, knew about this thing called search funds where people go out and kind of find a business to acquire. That's like private equity, but sort of on a smaller scale. And I knew I needed to do something in software. I knew about software from my previous work, and I knew I needed a remote company because I lived in Barcelona. So I searched, read a ton of different documents, books. And finally, after about a year and a half, Lanteria came along, and I got into the HR space through that, just through serendipity, and dug in. And for me as an entrepreneur, I think, the key thing is you have to find passion and interest in pretty much anywhere you go. And so I've dove deep into HR, performance, things like that. And we have our own podcast in our company. And I basically meet weekly with HR professionals and just learn how it works because I don't come from this world. I've never worked in a very large company. And so for me, it's a whole new thing to learn, how they use our product, how they use other products, and how the whole HR space works.
So I'm curious, from your perspective, what are the biggest pain points around software for HR people right now? And, what would you say are the biggest sort of challenges that HR software is helping people solve?
I mean, the biggest challenge that it solves is obviously all the paper shuffling that used to go back and forth, especially if you're in a high velocity, like recruiting, high recruiting company where we're bringing a lot of people in, we have to onboard them. Then we're, managing them. And a lot of times they're offboarding them as well, because, there are companies that are hiring people at a very rapid pace, or, construction companies. Any company that has a rapid hiring process needs an HR software. For other companies, the paper shuffling is obviously an issue, but the other thing is just absence management, knowing when people are there, when they're gone, how many days off have there been. People were keeping track of this stuff on Excel spreadsheets. Even we still get clients that come to us and we ask them, what are you using now? And they say Excel. And they have, 200 employees. And you say like, wow, this must be crazy. We had a company that was 3,000 employees and was still doing it through an Excel macro spreadsheet that somebody had built years before. And the new VP of HR came in and said, like, we got to, just from a security standpoint, we need to be using this. I mean, one of the key things for HR software is making sure there's security, making sure that all this documentation information, employee information, you have sensitive things in there, is in a protected space where, if you just have it in Google Drive and in an Excel spreadsheet, obviously that's not the most protected space. You need to be using software that can take care of that. I'd say those are sort of like the biggest, most broad pain points. I mean, what I think is, I'd say one of the most difficult things that people have, and I think we'll discuss this later, is actually getting the software to work, getting it stood up, getting it implemented, and then getting your employees to use it on a day-to-day basis. Because the cool thing about HR software is, people don't think about this, but besides email, it's really the only piece of software that everyone in the company has to touch at some point. So you have to make sure you're building software that people can use and it's intuitive. Otherwise, HR is going to be getting like help desk tickets like, hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? You want to make sure it's very easy for people to follow. So that's one of the biggest pain points from when you actually pick out a software and put it in place, that your employees know how to use it, you can get it stood up, and that it's easy to use.
I can't even imagine looking at that much data on a spreadsheet. My eyes would just black eyes. You see a big Excel sheet and you're just like, what else can I do today?
Yeah, just get me out of here. I mean, imagine the people that would onboard the new HR person and be like, here's the Excel spreadsheet. And they're like, what is this?
It's like somebody who's been using some big solution and they're like, oh my gosh.
For like a decade plus. This was a bank that was doing this.
Oh my.
Absolutely crazy.
Finance has its traditions. I just didn't think that was one of them.
They are slow, but finance is the slowest to move. I mean, they still use like COBOL as their technology for a lot of the banking systems. So it is a very slow moving industry in general.
Yeah. Well, like designing a tech stack, it's always a challenge. It can be very time consuming, and technology, changes fast. But it seems like now that change, like the level of change and how quickly it happens, is sort of intensifying. What advice do you have for folks, particularly in the startup space, as they build out a new tech stack, but they're trying to keep one eye on the future?
It's really hard right now to give anyone good, solid advice. Like yesterday, I was talking to someone like, what are your predictions for 2024? And I was like, I could give you my predictions for like the next 5 years, and maybe those would be more certain than what's going to happen this year. I think a lot of times too, people are very worried about these like short-term changes that are going to happen. But a lot of times it does take a lot longer for these things to take hold. I mean, you still go into companies and you see them using very antiquated technologies, very big companies. You see companies like Constellation Software is a good example. They're a company that buys up small software companies. They've been buying up software companies for 15 years. They do 180 purchases per year of vertical software. And basically, most of these companies are just antiquated, 15 to 20-year-old pieces of software that continue to work. They're cash flowing. They're great pieces of software that just work, but you would never look at them and be like, oh, I'm going to build this product right now because they are terribly, poorly built. But sometimes it doesn't matter like what the tech stack is. As long as it works and it has security and it's built well, you can get clients, and the clients will stick around, because changing software for big companies is a huge task. I mean, it's a huge pain. Like even for my company, we have, 20 plus people, and we use Confluence, for example, and Jira. And we have thought about changing because people just don't document very well. And we know like Notion would be a better thing for like our size company. And whenever we bring it up, people just this huge friction point that no, come on, like we've already done this. Then we're gonna have to migrate it and I have to learn this new thing. It's like, it's just a database. Like you just type things in and put it there. Like we'll build it, creates all these problems. So, I mean, if you're an entrepreneur starting out, I mean, I would keep an eye on like what AI can do. I mean, we look a lot at, because we're in Microsoft, we look a lot at like what's going on with Copilot, what's going on behind the scenes, what are they trying to do with Microsoft Teams? I'd say I'd keep an eye on what you can do, but the main important part with this is just, what do these new technologies allow me to do internally? Can I develop faster? Do I not have to hire 5 developers? Can I hire 3 because all this technology has been built out? I mean, I think it's a lot easier to build software, and it's going to become a lot easier, which means it'll become commoditized. But at the same time, that means it's all about building a better user interface, building a better product and use case, and understanding your customers, because it's going to be way more efficient to build this. So in the end, I would just make sure you understand like how you can build things these days.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then like, now we're in this time where like everyone's talking about AI. It's funny that you said that it's tough to make predictions. I did recently a story about AI, and so one of my friends read it, and he was like, well, what do you think's going to happen over the next like year or two, and I was like, dude, I don't know. I was like, to be honest with you, like, I don't really know. 2 years ago, I didn't know what ChatGPT was,
Yeah.
Look at how big of a part it's playing in all of our, workflows now. So like, I can't, and then there's all the sort of extraneous factors, right? So like, I can't really make a prediction on that.
It's very hard to predict, and it's hard to know like what impacts they'll have on all different types of software. I mean, we're looking and trying to figure out as the sand sort of change underneath you, but can't really figure out what this is going to do because it's also hard to understand what it will be able to do in short periods of time because they're making pretty big leaps quickly. So it's kind of like, well, I don't know.
Yeah. That was kind of coming up with my next question. I was like, where does AI sort of fit into an ideal HR tech stack? And how do you see it changing the work of an HR person over the next few, as that develops?
Actually, I see AI making probably some of the biggest changes into, I would say, probably accounting software and HR software in the next few years. I think accounting software, because it's so numbers based, it'll be easy to understand the data that it's reading. I mean, the key thing with AI, at least, LLM things that we're sort of seeing now, is that it takes someone away from having to custom build software or to know how to code things. And it allows you to use, normal language to interact with software. So where I see HR going, and this is what we're, trying to leverage, and we're hoping by the end of the year, we'll have using Copilot and have a new Microsoft Teams app and be using Copilot. Where I see this going for HR is that you're not going to have to call your software provider and say, hey, can we build this custom solution, or we need this dashboard, or find like a technical person to make these dashboards for you, or Power BI type of stuff. It's just going to be, you talk to the Copilot or the LLM and you say, I want a dashboard that shows me X, Y, and Z data for this department from this date to this date. And it'll pull it up and build, and I want it in the format of, XY graph with these types of data points, and I want it to be in these colors. And it'll pop up on your screen inside of Microsoft Teams probably, and it'll make people's life a lot easier where they don't have to go find the IT team, go to the software provider, or even when they're shopping for a piece of software. We do a lot of customization for our clients because we get complex customers, oil and gas companies that have very specific workflows and needs. And I think this will make it so, us as software developers, we have to make it more robust and make it more configurable. But at the same time, because the language models will be able to configure it for us using just simple language, not having to go find somebody technical or be technical to do it. So I'd say that's going to be the biggest impact. And that's why HR, I think, will be the most impacted, because it's a group of people that aren't technical usually. Marketing people, finance people, HR people are usually the least technical people inside of a company. And it'll make it way easier for them to work with their software and adapt it for themselves.
Yeah, like you said, they're not super tech savvy. They're more, people focused. And hopefully this will allow them, you always hear the line, like, it'll allow them to focus on people. I hope that's the case.
All of us and our competitors, we're all selling the same thing. You go on people's sites, it's like, focus on your people, have more time for your people. You go into like a forum of HR people and they're just complaining about how much stupid busy work they have to do all the time.
I know, it's almost like you can feel like real pain around just like the amount of minutia they have to move,
Yeah. The amount of lawyers. I mean, you just have lawyers involved. I mean, if everything ran as it's supposed to run, any piece of software would make everyone's life be easier. The issue is every company's complex because of people that are involved. And so something breaks down, lawyers have to get involved. There's an issue. I mean, I sit in some of these Facebook groups of HR just to learn. And I'm always amazed because I've never worked in a big company. I'm always amazed at the things that happen in these companies are just incredible. Like the decisions people make and the weird things they do. And you're like, why did you do this at work?
I know. Follow the human resources like subreddit, and oh my, like some of the things that come up in there, you're like, wow.
I'm glad I don't work at this company. I'm glad I'm not this person.
So the implementation phase of any new technology, it's so important. What advice do you have for folks as they sort of lay the groundwork for a new technology to be used in the workplace?
So this was the thing that surprised me the most about HR. When we took over this company, I didn't know anything about the level of implementation that went into HR software. And at first, when I took over our company, I was like, okay, this is where the bottleneck is. This is what we need to solve. Implementation is this big pain point. Our customers don't like it. Our team doesn't like it. Let's solve it. And then I went out to the market to see like how other teams solve it, big companies. And it's either you are not exactly like Bamboo or some of like the SMB type of ones where you're just basically like, here's the product. We'll help you with like a data import if you need some help. And then you're on your own. Or, you get into Ceridian, you get into Workday, you get into these companies that go to larger companies, and it's just incredible the amount of implementation and time and months and years that go into this to implement all of the modules and all the ways that teams want to. And so I still haven't been able to crack this nut. I think a lot of times from what I've seen, I think a lot of times when just from the meetings I've been involved with clients, people tend to overcomplicate things. They tend to see their system as like this snowflake that is unique and we have to maintain the system. We created the system and we want to keep doing it. But I think it would behoove a lot of people to just say, like, what do other companies do? You're the experts. You built the software. Like, what should we do to make your software work the best? And it might make things a little bit easier, but at the same time, I understand, complex companies, complex processes, things get set up in a certain way and you kind of have to go with those. But a lot of times I see people complaining about implementation, but I also see them overcomplicating their implementation process and sort of shooting for the moon to build these systems that they probably didn't need to build. And it just creates a lot of frustration where you don't see the same things in accounting or in marketing software. People kind of take it as it is and, they adapt their books and they adapt their software how it is. I mean, Sage, for example, is a very complex software product. And they're Sage partners, but I don't know people that complain about like how difficult it is to implement Sage into their company or other than SAP. I mean, SAP is really the only example where universally everyone hates it, but that's because you're at companies that have 10,000 employees and have this complexity where we see it at, 100 employees. We'll see companies that are building out these like complex implementations. And you say, maybe if you listen to us and we can help you simplify this a little bit, but I find that doesn't often.
I know I worked at companies where it was like they were hesitant to implement a new software because of the regulatory stuff that we faced in our industry. And I kept thinking like, well, come on, we're not in healthcare. We can't have that many more regulations than health data. You know what I mean? So I think there's always like, change is hard. And so like you said, learning a new thing. I remember when I had to go from Trello to Asana and I just remember thinking, why?
I do things like that. I agree. I mean, like I said, you're moving like big organizations, lots of people. I say the training part is one of the hardest parts, that trying to train the manager, especially in HR, there's all these levels of, you're training the CEO or the upper management, training the HR management, you're training the middle managers how to do it. And then you got to train the employees as well. And there's a lot of layers and a lot of people touching this stuff. And training has to be pretty spot on. I mean, when we took over, we noticed that we were doing like bespoke training because we would adapt a few things inside of it. And so like the out of the box training didn't work. And I said to them, like, guys, we're changing like 3 buttons. And then instead of just having a recorded thing and saying like, oh, by the way, these are 3 buttons that you need to pay attention to. Our team was spending like 12 hours to train people. I'm like, that's insane that we would spend 12 hours with a client because we changed like 3 things inside of our base software. And, it's good to spend some time with them and let them ask questions if they are bigger clients. But a lot of times it's just better to like have things well recorded, well documented, that employees can like walk through this stuff very easily. There's, tools like walk.me now that, make it easy for people to see like, click here to do this, click here. So like the training can walk through things pretty well. But it does amaze me when I watch, and I've done like secret shopping and things with other companies, and that the amount of complexities that get thrown into the implementation training process feel like there are ways to simplify it but sometimes you might offend people trying to push it too hard.
What are the biggest areas for growth in the HR software market, in your opinion? Like, what are you expecting to see sort of proliferate in the coming months and years?
I do think, obviously AI is going to be a big part of, how a lot of our competitors are going to try and differentiate themselves. I've already seen like companies like HiBob are really leveraging AI as like their frontline thing. I don't see anyone doing anything that spectacular, like what I mentioned of saying like, hey, you can build these dashboards using AI. It's more of like, we have a good chat bot that we've been able to, a lot of people have just really, their chat bots have gotten infinitely better over the last year. And that's essentially like their sort of what they're hanging their hat on for AI, which is fine. I mean, for me personally, so we're in the mid-market where I think from like a business perspective for us, I think the mid-market is where we're going to be able to grow and where you're going to see sort of expansion for some of these smaller companies. I know people at Workday has a lot of problems going down market. It's very expensive, very difficult to implement. You need a lot of people. So there is an opportunity sort of in this like messy middle market where a lot of people are sort of fighting it out. But I think there's an opportunity from like our business perspective there. And then from a user perspective, I mean, I think where we're going to be seeing a lot is moving towards suites, similar to what I think Lattice has shown. Like they've gone from being, just performance management to being full on HRIS and probably moving towards HCM type of product that'll have, end to end, like seeing what Rippling has pretty much done. And obviously Rippling is more out of the box. It's not as easy to make complex workflows inside of there. But I think we're going to start seeing where people they just want to buy one product and it does all the things, even if it does a few of those things not as well as a certain other one. I think they just don't want all these point solutions floating around and having everyone in different logins, different places. I have to use this app and I have to use this tool and uniting them all together, it's strange because we did build all these API layers and these integrations and all this stuff into products. So all the different products can sort of fit together. But what you've seen is that they don't fit together that well as just the native experience. And so I think companies are just going to start moving towards like, just find me all of it inside of here. I don't want, 3 or 4 different solutions. So I think the point solution is going to have a lot of difficulties. There's probably going to be a lot of consolidation where some of the really good point solutions are going to get rolled into some of these bigger products in some way, sort of like what Microsoft has done with email or calendar. They end up buying up the point solutions and trying to improve their own suite. So I think a lot of that's going to happen over the next few years. And, you're going to see companies that are going to kind of get left out in the cold, like, oh, my OKR software got bought by Lattice, and now I have to sign up for Lattice's full HRIS in order to be able to use it. And I think in general, I mean, the industry is just going to keep growing. I think HR teams have seen they need these products. I think the NPS is still very low, most part, in most of these. So I think there are opportunities for companies like Rippling and Lattice that have good products to start moving up market more, because you just see that people hate these products. They hate using them. Like I barely know anyone that likes using any of their HR software. And I think one of the other trends is going to continue to be just like global workforces. We've leaned a lot into making it easy for like conglomerates or large companies or people that have employees in a lot of different places to not have to have like different licenses or different products. Like you're in one product, this is just a separate office, and you can have sort of your full global workforce there. I don't know exactly the shape it's going to take. I mean, you see companies like Deal or remote.com that make it very easy to hire people overseas. I think those products are overpriced for what they actually do. I mean, you can find a good EOR for almost probably 25% of what remote.com's charging you if you want to dig a little bit deeper and you get the same offer and the same type of product. But I think companies are going to continue to sort of build global workforces, and they're going to want products that allow them to manage that and easily hire these people.
So before we go, 2 things we'll need to do. First, I want to give you a chance to tell people more about where they can connect with you, find out more about what you got going on with Lanteria.
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Andrew Swiler, Swiler, or on Twitter, Swiler A, Swilera. They're usually the places online that I hang out. Lanteria is Lanteria.com. If you are a Microsoft company, if you're a company that uses Microsoft, we are the number one HRMS for Microsoft users and Microsoft companies. So take a look, check us out, reach out to us, tell them I sent you, and see if we can get you a good deal on some great software.
Oh, who doesn't love a referral bonus?
Yeah, exactly. That referral money's going into my pocket.
All right. The second thing is we've started a little tradition here on the podcast where you get to ask me a question. So I'll turn it over to you. Ask me anything you want.
So I struggle we're a fully remote company right now. We have been, we'll continue to be a fully remote company. I was interested to know sort of in your experience, because people always ask me, like they'll refer to me and I'm like, I run a remote company, but I always think there's more to learn. What do you see as the critical things to keep people happy inside of remote companies now that comes sort of a normal thing? People are getting used to it. And I've noticed that just the fact of having that freedom to be at home and work from home isn't getting them that far. There's still like, some people got to miss these perks that used to come from being in an office, but it's hard to make like an analogous perk for some of these people. So I don't know, any ideas you have of like how to keep people happy inside this remote workforce?
For me, the biggest thing that creates a level of satisfaction with the remote working is just adopting async type working. Because like, I remember I worked at one company and this was like right after it was the year of the pandemic that I switched to working for this company. We all had to be on 8:30 to 5:30. And I was like, well, then you sort of, you know what I mean? Like, okay, yeah, I'm not commuting, but I'm like chained to it for these hours. That's really weird. And it was sort of like not necessarily accepted that like, oh, I can just do this later. It's like you do it during your working hours. So I think like just giving people that it's supposed to be flexibility, make sure that they can be flexible within it. And then, what are some of the things I've seen done is like, like little, I worked somewhere and they sent out ugly Christmas sweaters to everybody and we all wore them on a Christmas call. It was just like kind of a stupid little thing, but it was sort of fun. And, and then you got this free ugly Christmas sweater. So I didn't have to go, looking for one for my next party. And so like little things like that, like do kind of keep people connected, I think, in a way that is fun and just sort of like lighthearted. I don't think anybody's gotten the remote thing totally right. I mean, maybe some companies, like I haven't worked at GitLab, so I don't know, maybe, but like I think a lot of smaller companies still struggle with like the reality of remote work and sort of like let it be flexible, make it sure that it feels like the remote thing actually does serve them. It's got to have a purpose. Otherwise, it's just sort of like, I don't drive. That's the only difference.
I don't have to wear pants if I don't want to. That's
Yeah, exactly. If that's the only difference, then the satisfaction will wear off.
We acquired this company. So like we inherited a company that they were remote, but just for the last few years. And they used to be in person, a lot of these people. And sometimes they give reactions to things like as if we don't really care about them because they don't have an office or things like that. I'm just struggling with trying to figure out, because I'm a big believer that in order to build sort of remote work culture, you have to hire people that are built for remote work because it is a type of person. Like I think it's like men and women. There's like 50-50 and you're either a remote work person or you want to be in person. And if you haven't hired those people because they were already in the company, need them and we want to work with them, but we're, trying to figure out ways to make them happy inside of this current setup. But my biggest struggle is the people we've hired love it. Like they gung-ho on remote work. They love it. They've already worked remotely. So we hired for that culture, but we still have people that are sort of there that it's not their cup of tea.
Right. I had a lot of people say to me over the last couple of years, like they miss the water cooler moments. And I think really the big thing with that is just sort of communicating out that like, you used to have to make the effort. Think of it from an introvert's point of view, right? Like you'd have to make an effort to go talk to someone and have that water cooler moment. Well, like remote work has just turned us all into like, you're going to have to reach out to the person and make an effort to have a discussion about it. It just has to be part of the culture though. Like that's okay. Like when people reach out to you, this is how you, like this is what the expectation is. It's a tough thing to replicate, but I think for like people who are younger and earlier in the career, I can understand like needing to be in the office, but for people who are maybe a little bit, 20 years on, I also understand that like for me personally, I don't feel the need to go into any offices.
I don't either. But I get some people, I don't know. It's something I've been struggling with the last month just because it's bubbled up a few times. And I can see this, difference between the people that we've hired versus the people that were there before. And they kind of like want an office. We actually did have an office. Most of them, the issue we have is unique to them. We have people that are in Kiev that have been with the company for a long time. And, I would do an offsite or bring us all together, but they can't leave the country. So we have some unique difficulties and challenges, but at the same time, we're trying to kind of solve those.
We recently published a piece on business continuity, talking about things like, what happens when war breaks out or there's, because of the situation in Palestine, for example. So like, what happens when you have an employee in these places or if there's a natural disaster and then you got to get them over a border, that kind of thing. So it's an interesting time because like between conflicts, climate change and everything else that's going on in the world, it is going to be an interesting time for that. So
a lot of interruptions.
Yes. All right. Well, Andrew, I want to thank you for joining us today. It's been a great chat.
Thank you, David. I appreciate being on and all the time you gave me.
Listeners, if you're in the market for HR software and you could use a bit of guidance, you are in luck. Our team here at People Managing People is dedicated to helping you find the solutions that are going to take your business to the next level. We've taken the time to compile lists of the best HR software solutions on the market, and even do in-depth reviews. You can find it all on the website. Just head on over to peoplemanagingpeople.com/tools to learn more. And if you want to subscribe to the newsletter, peoplemanagingpeople.com/subscribe. You can stay up to date on all the latest in HR software, people operations, trends, you name it. So until next time, drink lots of water, say something nice about yourself out loud.